What are some things that regular people will likely never get to experience? Going to space. As a child of the space age, I thought we would be closer than we are now. We felt much closer in 1975. Back then, we were at least trying. Head over to NASA's website, hit some YouTube videos. We are trying more than ever. I'm fine with this. My 3-year-old asked if he could be an astronaut when he got big. When I said yes, I wondered if I really would be okay with him leaving the planet. Hearing your own music on the radio. My bandmates and I were fortunate that we had a couple of radio stations that played local bands. One was them playing a song off our EP, the other was us playing live. The live one was also the only time I got stage fright. I panicked and couldn't remember how to start a song. I was driving to work one day and a song that I recorded on randomly played on the radio. I played trombone, which was mostly background stuff, but it was still pretty cool. Same thing happened to me, comment above. I had heard my stuff on the radio before, but there was a time I was flipping through stations and there it was. So weird to hear something familiar and assume at first it isn't you. It took me about 510 seconds before I realized it was my band. Very surreal. Never got quite that far, but the band that I sang some with did tour the Southeast for several years. It was an incredible experience. It wound up kind of ugly, because all my friends got strung out on DS at the end, which not only ended the band, but also our social circle. But I'd still go back and do it all again. Yeah, while I mostly stayed away from the DS, our manager, road crew, and other friends all ended up in bad places. This was in Los Angeles, in the late 70s early 80s, and there were too many people snorting stuff up their noses. Some didn't make it, and what made it particularly messed up was that all of these guys came from wealthy families. Constipation. When the term regular immediately goes to one meaning. I dislike that you had to explain it to me. I suffer chronic constipation, regularly. Fiber supplements are the SH. They come in gummy form now. A stranger coming to see you perform music and knowing the words to your song. It was wild waking up to this kind of response. It's awesome that so many people have experienced this from both sides of the fence. Thanks for the gold, stranger. I saw the notification and then realized my coffee maker was overflowing and could not find it again to give a proper shout out. Now that's cool. It's bizarre and one of the best feelings I ever had, even though it didn't happen that often. Totally agree. It's been 22 years since I quit the band, but I still smile thinking about seeing people mouthing every word. What a mindf in the best way possible. I guess I should link this then. 50 seconds in. Been nearly 10 years, but this video lives rent-free in my head. Imagine going to America and playing your first concert there, not thinking you're all that big, and the crowd all know the lyrics to your song. That's really cool. Probably took a while for her to get over that. Thanks for sharing. I was going to say being violently compressed in a shady submarine, but that probably does happen occasionally. I'm not sure they actually experienced it though. Correct. Died so fast it wasn't even a blink of an eye nor a moment even. It was just that fast. I mean, don't we all want to die that fast? We're all compressed on a shady submarine. A shady submarine. A shady submarine. Oh crap, that's in my head now. Ride in a F-15 doing the speed of sound. Danger zone playing intensifies. Lena, what? My grandmother went Mach 2 on the Concorde. She said it was no big deal. Absolute silence in nature. 2 years ago, I stopped to fix my glove on top of a mountain while skiing. Everyone else had gone down by the time I was done and the total silence of everything hit. No wind, no other voices. Couldn't even see anything man-made because it was a near whiteout. Just me, the snow, and the shapes of the trees. I might be getting too deep into this, but the overwhelming weight that was that silence made me feel like I fit perfectly into everything for a moment. I don't think something like sensory deprivation could even come close to it. Now, any regular person could experience something like that, and I hope anyone who wants to, and even those who don't really care, do. In fact, have an experience akin to mine. But it was such a chance collision of many different factors that I think it lies far enough outside of the norm. Absolute silence is rare. I only experienced it once in an eastern Oregon desert. I was driving down a noisy dirt road singing along to the music when I stopped to check if I had a rock stuck in my tire. It was between two low hills that blocked the desert wind. When I stepped out of the car, it was perfectly still and silent. No noises from insects or animals. Nothing. It was incredible. I had something similar in a desert as well. Once you notice how little sound there can be, you really notice how much sound we create. Wow. That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing. Winning the lottery. The odds of winning the lottery are incredibly slim. So most people will never even come close. Even if you do win, the money can come with a lot of problems, such as family and friends asking for handouts. Someone has to win it. Might as well be me. Can't win it if you're not in it. I always hope I will win. I never buy a ticket, but I always hope. 2 of my coworkers won. One won $100. Oh. The other $20. Oh. The great thing about that is that $100. Oh can be life-changing. But not so much that it really f's everything up. You can make a down payment on a house, or pay down your house, get a college degree, etc. But you aren't gonna have long-lost cousins reaching out to you for money and then hating your guts. Simultaneous actual happiness and financial freedom. You found one. I am regular, actually happy and achieve financial freedom. Can I get $200? I don't get here by throwing away money. Exceptionally common for people of my generation. Seems exceptionally rare for younger people. The ability to see sound as different colors. Those people who have that ability blow my mind, and I honestly don't understand how they can function. I feel like it would drive me insane. I dialed a wrong number once, and was connected to light blue. It's only ever happened to me once. But it was the craziest thing. It was a tone, a single, solid, drawn-out tone that sounded exactly like light blue. I taste purple all the time. No Sunny D, only purple drink. It's more keys than sounds. I have synesthesia, and it's mostly keys. Like C major is blue to me, a minor a deep red. But it's odd, because C major and a minor are relative keys to each other. It doesn't seem to make sense to the color spectrum what colors end up where. Minor keys and major keys are different for sure. Also, I am a sound engineer, and started to see frequency ranges as textures. It's not just keys. I recently realized it's all sorts of things like letters and months and states, and even numbers sometimes. I don't get it. It's not like you're hallucinating, it's more of an association thing. I have always been obsessed with sounds and timbre too. Harmonic content can even show up as textures in the colors, which was helpful as a sound engineer. So when I am mixing a song, it is like I am seeing the frequency spectrum. I visualize the envelope of sounds and their harmonic content. And spoiler alert, that doesn't mean I am the best at all of this. I think it helps, but it doesn't make me any better than anyone else who has put in the practice I have. That's so funny. I have a different type of synesthesia, but as soon as I read C major is blue, I thought absolutely not, C major is gold. So maybe my synesthesia takes more forms than I think about. Ha. Pain-free days. If I'm interpreting regular people correctly. From my perspective, I see regular people as people who don't have a chronic pain condition. The sensation that is a pain-free day or even a moment is like my whole body gets a vacation. A summer day. Elation. Regular people take painlessness for granted. Big agree. Hugs from another chronic illness homie. Soft hugs for all of us chronic pain sufferers. Edit. I removed parenthesis to remove negative connotation. Chronic pain club member here. Stuck awake at 1 a.m. BC of a spinal injection. Woo. Solidarity. Friends. I woke up one day maybe 10 years ago. And mind you, I had already been dealing with chronic pain for almost a decade at that point. And I was absolutely 100% pain-free. I literally spent an hour thinking I had died. And then several hours in so much shock that I honestly barely got to appreciate and enjoy a pain-free day. Went back to my regular pain the next day. I've mostly accepted living with chronic pain and health issues. But there are days where I am envious of those who are regular people. I had a similar experience around about a decade ago too. I thought I had somehow paralyzed myself in my sleep and wouldn't move for about an hour. Too scared to find out I had. It's weird, but I was never envious of people who weren't always in pain until that day. Since then it crops up now and again. Getting to be on a super yacht. I got to have lunch on a super yacht once. A billionaire told his crew he might want to use it over a long weekend. So they spent months sailing from somewhere in the Pacific to the Hamptons. He also had his private pilots in the NYC area. The billionaire changed his plans last minute and I was friends with the pilots, so they invited me on the super yacht. I got to hang out with people who were living the absolute life. There were like 2 Michelin star chefs, shipmates, a masseuse, and some other rich people minions. They told me about how they just set around the world having a fantastic time and only have the boss on maybe once a year. After a fantastic lunch and hanging out, they got word to sail to New Zealand by Christmas. It's a totally different world, isn't it? I was working in Abu Dhabi and a so-and-so invited me on yacht that cost USD 10 mir just to operate, Defuke. We all went to Singapore and Sydney with small stops on the way and back. One morning I was having a croissant, and I was asked by one of the chefs what I'd like for breakfast the following morning. And I said, "What's my options?" The answer was, "Sir, just like for you'd like." I just wanted bread, some cheese, and honey I guess. I don't know how the F they did it, but they got bread, artisanal cheese and honey from my home FING state in the US. I didn't even know we made honey. Would you like anything to read? Yes, I think I'll pick up a National Geographic when we get to Singapore. Otherwise I've got my Kindle. They brought the latest to me at a fast stop at Uvari, India, wherever the F that is. It was a great time, but very eye-opening. I mean, I know there are people with money, but it's just weird how different. Macbeth 1. Darling, you've been to New York. You must fly out to visit us maybe the week after we get home and recover, and show us around. That would be marvelous. How am I going to be able to do that? My uncle was a super yacht chef in the 90s early 00s. His stories about how they ordered supplies and took requests are insane. My favorite is when Nigella Lawson and her family were on board for Christmas, so he went insane stocking the boat with the best of the best. They request hamburgers, the kids were on holidays. That's what they wanted. My uncle was like, he also had Oprah on board and was listed one of her top 100 chefs in the world, which was pretty cool. Right, I have to make do on my crummy regular yacht. You'll get there, champ. What is something that was billed as the next big thing and actually was not a complete failure? The internet. I remember when it was first starting out in the late 90s and nerds were saying it would change everything about the way we live and do business, etc. And I was like, yeah, but it turned out they were right. I remember when they were calling it the information superhighway. In my college classes we debated whether people would want to read the news on their slates, and most of us naively predicted that people would still want physical newspapers and magazines. Well, yeah. Have you ever tried to swat a fly with a rolled up tablet? No, but I have thrown my phone at various living objects. Whether or not alcohol played a factor isn't the subject here. I remember my brother telling me television would broadcast over the internet someday in the late 90s. I could not even conceive of it at that time, but here we are, lol. Our IT teacher told us in 1997 that he booked his holiday on the World Wide Web, and we all laughed at him because it sounded so crazy. Amazon. It was clear fairly early on that it was going to be a huge disruption to bookstores. But it wasn't clear that it was going to disrupt all the stores. My grandma, who's been dead for 10 plus years now, was an Amazon early adopter. She got an email with like a flyer of books, which she printed of course, and she bought them with her credit card and dial-up internet. All I remember is looking at the flyer, picking out books, and my mom joking that it was a Scholastic book fair for grown-ups, and her sitting there with her credit card in her hand and a cigarette and a whiskey in the other while the modem screamed. It seemed like a fad. If we had been paying attention and bought stock, I'd be retired instead of sitting on Reddit. Perhaps retired. On Reddit? Still boggles my mind that they have also had such a massive impact on cloud computing after being a place to save $2 on paperback books. Solid-state drives. They're better in nearly every way. Faster, smaller, lighter, lower power, and by now, cheaper up to about 512 gigabytes. Spinning hard drives are still cheaper if you want to store terabytes and are okay with being less efficient. The chip will wear out after being written too much, but that limit is way beyond what you'll do before you buy another computer. On newer ones, yeah, but on the 64 and 128 GB SSDs, that was a genuine issue. OSH. I have a 128 on my 6-year-old laptop. Am I next the problem time? I put my OS on an SSD from 2012 until about 6 months ago. It still works fine, just not enough room for all the SH on my PC. I use it as a backup now. I think you might run into problems with earlier generations from 2008 or whenever they started getting pushed out. Unless you try to defrag it. Don't ask me how I know that. There's no point in defraging SSDs. Electric scooters are becoming what Segway wanted to be, a bicycle for the lazy. So are e-bikes, which have a throttle. They're just cheap, electric motorcycles. Pretty fun too. The Segway guy was right about everything but the shape. The idea was sound. The execution was flawed. Like even back then, putting one wheel in front of the other made more sense. No need for gyros, as the vehicle was naturally stable. Maybe the awkward design was due to battery tech? iPads. They were widely laughed at, especially the name. People had been trying to sell tablets for years with no success. They laughed mercilessly at the name iPad, saying it sounded like a feminine hygiene product. Still does emo if you think about it. You don't really need to think about it, lol. Microsoft for one was way too fixated on insisting that any smaller form factor machine still have the start menu for branding purposes, even if chewed up screen real estate. Microsoft still hasn't really figured out the mobile interface. It's embarrassing at this point. I can out on one hand the number of people that I've seen using a Surface without a keyboard and mouse. Sliced bread. People are still buying it, if I recall correctly. Wanted to confirm this as I wasn't 100%. I went to the store and would you believe there was like a whole aisle of loaves of bread that were pre-sliced. They did it. The sons of BS did it. My grocery store has a customer-controlled bread slicing machine. That seems slightly better than my grocery store's bread-controlled customer slicing machine. That's a really useful invention lol. I think it's mainly used for the bread in schools. Online shopping. I acknowledge that I'm old-fashioned and still prefer to go to stores and try things on. But in my town, there's only one store left I buy clothes at. Our mall is almost entirely vacant spaces. Of the 4 cornerstone stores they had, only one remains. One was replaced by a grocery store. A Macy's became a VA clinic. The other has just been vacant for 6 years now. What's interesting is this is starting to reverse, because a lot of online stores have turned into marketplaces. I don't really trust them anymore and would rather shop in person when possible now. Places like Amazon and Walmart are fine when I'm looking for a product by a specific brand. They've been littered with dozens of sellers selling the same item under different brand names though. I don't want to see 35 entries of the same model of toaster branded by companies with names that are meaningless letters. I want a recognizable brand. Give me the Black & Decker one, not the XFSFU Adobe brand. It seems like 80% of what's on Amazon now is knockoff garbage from China. I like buying clothes online because they don't fit and sending things back, so now I have loads of stuff that doesn't fit me. Amazon makes it incredibly easy to return things. You don't even need to pack them. LeBron James, when he was still 1,617 people thought he would go on to be one of the greatest athletes of all time. Spoiler alert, he did it. Why didn't you blank out the spoilers, man? I'm only on season 15 of the NBA. In season 15, Celtics beat the Hawks in 5. Get F-ed. Wireless earbuds. They were mocked when announced, but you rarely see anyone with wired ones anymore. I think the main thing that was mocked was the styling of the AirPods. As far as I can remember, the tech itself was generally seen as impressive once they were proven to work well. Even the styling has been updated, the tech got better. Oh, and they were mocked for how easy it is to lose them if they fall out, which is a fair criticism in my opinion. Even today, mine are constantly falling out of my ears. I get that they're convenient, but I kinda dislike them. I get the over-the-ear kind. Buds of any kind have never stayed in my ears. Brock Lesnar was literally nicknamed the next big thing upon arriving in WWE and did pretty well for himself. Vince is right every so often. Like a broken clock. A broken clock is right 6 times a day if you really think about it. Shut up, Kissel. 3D printing. I thought it was going to just be a short-term fad, but it stuck around longer than I anticipated. I'd think drones might be the same way if they start using them for deliveries on a wide scale. Drones have been huge for videography. They're cheap, accessible, and they get shots that you would have no chance getting on that budget before. They really did change the game. Before drones they would have to hire a helicopter and you can't fly too close or the wind from the propellers would be obvious. Now it just send up the drone. Boom. Done. Smaller than that, even. It opened aerial shots to small budget productions. That's the biggest effect. Emo. Video calling. It took 30 years plus, but it has changed how we communicate. What are you doing with video calls that you weren't doing with audio calls? Myself and most of my coworkers never turn our cameras on for remote meetings, and the only time I use FaceTime on my phone is around the holidays. What are you doing with video calls that you weren't doing with audio calls? Staring at myself in the picture-in-picture? Niche thing. But in miniature painting. The GW contrast paints that basically have some regular paint qualities and sort of a wash glaze as well. Makes painting to standard easier with adding a little bit of depth to the model. Now there's competitors that made their own version. And new techniques, slap chop mod. Well, that's basically underpainting with sort of glazing, but still made the painting part of the hobby a lot more accessible for people. Yeah, people were doing things like painting multiple layers of a wash before it. But contrast paints really does fit the bill. Are we talking about something like the Army Painter speed paints? Because sweet Jeebez, I love them. Yeah, GW started the trend, and AP followed with cheaper ones. I'm in on this trend. I had over 100 paints and love the new sets that keep coming out of contrast and speed paints. Judging by half of these comments, not reading comprehension. Reddit, almost entirely text-based platform users, half can't read. The iPhone. The whole push away from having a physical keypad in phones that the iPhone popularized seemed preposterous to me at the time. I'm still not a fan of phones getting rid of the physical home row buttons. Sometimes the screen freezes in a way that you actually need a hardware interrupt to fix. I did eventually come to terms with getting rid of the audio jack. Data is data. The 3.5mm jack being dedicated to just audio out made no sense, but I disliked that they just got rid of it instead of putting in a second USB-C port. I think everything implements this now with holding some combination of power lock volume. Massively parallel chip-based DNA sequencing. Proposed as the next-generation sequencing platform relative to automated Sanger sequencing. How successful was it? Well, most people today literally just refer to it as next-generation sequencing, because of how accurate that term turned out to be. It dropped the cost of sequencing orders of magnitude faster than Moore's Law, which is already insane. Also love to see some biotech stuff here. DNA identification and relationship analysis, from restriction-digested bands on agarose, to fluorescent STR kits, to SNP microarrays, karyotyping, from actual cytogenetic karyotyping, to microarray virtual karyotyping, to using NGS exome metadata in various ways to perform simulated virtual karyotyping.